Hey everyone, welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast. My name is Sam Thrash. I'm your show host over here. Thanks for tuning in. In a recent podcast with our staff manager, Todd Sellen, we were talking about some whitetail hunting in Michigan in the 2024 season, and I mentioned how I was wanting to get more of our own staff members on our show this year to talk hunting, to talk their personal experiences, their tactics, strategies, all that kind of stuff, specifically in relation to whitetail season and deer hunting. And we're continuing that this week with this episode. We have Ryan, who's one of our staff members up in New York, joining me for this week's podcast. This was a very educational conversation for me as a fellow whitetail hunter, even though I'm in Texas and he's in New York. We talk a lot about the rut. We talk a lot about whitetail behavior and hunting tactics and how to go strategically into a scenario where you're trying to kill a big deer. How to look at your data, how to look at your Reveal Cell Cams and the statistics that they offer and all that kind of stuff, and how to make these educated decisions on how you're going to hunt these deer. I share with Ryan some of my own personal situations and some of the bucks I'm dealing with on Texas dirt this year, and he gives me some insight into what he thought I should do, some tactics he thinks I should implement, some things that I should watch for, and then also what he has done this year leading up into him killing one of his number one target buck this year up on his place up in New York. So it's a very hearty, very healthy, very rich conversation in my opinion. Again, talking about whitetail hunting and the rut and everything revolving around that. So if you are a whitetail hunter, this episode's for you. Do not turn it off. Stay with us, and I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. First and foremost, little housekeeping, talk about some of our partners here at Fall Obsession Podcast. Hoot Camo is the first one. I've been wearing Hoot Camo for a couple seasons now. I absolutely love the gear. It's a high quality product. It is well made. The pattern is extremely versatile. To give you guys an idea, I've worn the same camo pattern in Colorado, Idaho, and Texas. My Hoot Camo has worked great. The pattern is functional for all these different environments. And the best thing about it is the gear is affordable to the blue collar hunter out there if you're looking to get into a good quality set of camouflage. So I can't recommend Hoot Camo enough. Go onto their website, hootcamo.com, and shop around. Use the code FALLOBSESSION15 at checkout. That will save you guys some money. And see everything they have to offer. They got more than just camo sets. They got lifestyle gear, hats, t-shirts, all that kind of stuff, fishing gear, you name it. So go check out Hoot Camo today. News on Safaris is a Fall Obsession partner. We have some folks on our team and outside of our organization that have hunted with News On and have had a great experience. So if you guys are looking to book that big African safari, that perhaps once in a lifetime adventure you've been saving up for, do it with News On. The best part about it is that News On Safaris is offering Fall Obsession podcast listeners a discount if you tell them that Fall Obsession sent you. So specifically, some of the savings you guys can take advantage of is a $500 trophy credit, free lodging, food, and drinks. Your professional hunter, tracker, and skinner fees are covered. Basic trophy prep is taken care of. All that comes out to a $2,250 value per person, and that's valid for up to 4 people in your hunting party. Do the quick math on that. You could be saving $9,000 on an already expensive trip, no matter who you book with. So book with News On. Again, all you have to do to get that deal is tell them Fall Obsession sent you. You can call Tim over there. His number is 303-946-9441. Again, that's Tim, and he will get you set up with News On Safaris. Trophy Edits is a Fall Obsession partner. I'm sure we have all had that picture at some point where it's a memorable moment from the field, a great hunt, a great kill, whatever it might be. We're looking forward to seeing the picture, and when we finally lay our eyes on it, it just doesn't do the moment justice in our mind. Perhaps the photo was blurry, out of focus, maybe the lighting was wrong, it was too dark, whatever the case might be. The Trophy Edits team is a group of professional and experienced guys that will clean those photos up for you and make the most out of your hunting memory. So give them a chance. Go to the link in the description on this episode that will take you over to Trophy Edits and let them know that you came from us. We always appreciate that. You guys head on over there, see what Trophy Edits can do for you. The Outdoor Call Radio app is a podcast partner. Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV, he created an app that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day. You will catch Fall Obsession podcast playing on that loop on Mondays, the same day as our new publications, along with tons of other hunting shows and podcasts that we all know and love. Go download the Outdoor Call Radio app today. It is free. You can start streaming immediately, and be sure that you follow Outdoors Dan and the Outdoor Call Radio app on social media, because he does a couple of different live radio show broadcasts throughout the week on local Midwestern radio stations. And even if you're not local to those radio stations, he shares the broadcasts on his social media. So again, it's Outdoors Dan and the Outdoor Call Radio app. Go download it today. Ridge Rock Hunt Company is good friends with all of us over here at Fall Obsession, and Derek Eves from Ridge Rock is the man if you are looking to book your next North American hunt with a vetted and trusted outfitter. Derek does all the hard work and will put you in contact with an outfitter that is right for you and a vetted and trusted source that he himself recommends. Ridge Rock Hunt Company, let them book your next hunt for you. Finally, thank you guys again for tuning in to another podcast. Whatever podcast platform you are streaming on, we ask that you please hit that follow or subscribe button at the top, whatever they have up there for you. Make sure your notifications are turned on if that's an option. That way you guys know every week when we drop a new podcast episode. Head on over to the YouTube channel. Be sure you're subscribed to our YouTube and have those notifications turned on as well. We not only put our podcast videos on our YouTube channel, but we also have several new productions that our media team is working on coming down the pipe later this fall. We have an Idaho elk hunt film that we're producing, a New York deer hunt, actually a deer hunt with Ryan, our podcast guest up here. We have a Sitka deer hunt, as well as our hunting shows, Midwest Mindset and Texas Dirt. We put new episodes on them coming out here pretty soon. So be sure you head on over to the YouTube, go to fallobsession.com. That's the website. That's where you guys can check out all of our content, including many, many educational whitetail-related hunting articles that Ryan, our guest this week, has written and published to our website. Go check all of those out. Pick you up a hat or a shirt, something to support a small-time hunting brand. We always appreciate that. If you're watching the podcast video, I got the Bear Country t-shirt on for this episode, and that shirt's only $6. $6 on our website right now, so head on over there and pick up one. And be sure you're following us on social media. We post daily, sometimes multiple times a day, especially during hunting season. You can stay in tune with everything that our staff across the country is doing and everything going on at Fall Obsession. So we always appreciate the support. With that, wrapping up the intro, heading on over for our conversation with Ryan this week. You guys are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Fall Obsession podcast. My name is Sam, hosting you guys. Thanks for joining. And my guest this week is one of our own guys here at Fall Obsession, Ryan from New York, member of our team. Welcome to the podcast, man. Appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, glad to have you, man. I'm looking forward to picking your brain. I know this is not your first podcast to be on, but it is your first Fall Obsession podcast. So for our listener base and those that are tuning in, take a moment, just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you're from, and all that good stuff.
Sure, yeah. My name's Ryan, obviously. From Western New York, born and raised. Been hunting, man, about 30 years now, maybe a little over that. Started when I was a youngster with my old man. You know, I was 9 years old. So I've learned quite a few things, become well versed, you know. I'm into real estate. That's kind of what I do, you know. But hunting's obviously my passion. It's my obsession, I should say.
There you go. Absolutely. It's all an obsession for us over here, I feel like. But so you do a lot in regards to the whitetail management side of everything. I would consider you an outsider looking in, somebody who's very well versed in the subject. And anybody who goes to our website, fallobsession.com, looks at the article section, they can see a lot of your written publications that you've done for us on various matters in the topic. But what is your setting up there in your neck of the woods. What kind of layout do you have? How big is in general, the property that you're working with, and all that kind of stuff? Kind of set the stage for us a little bit.
Sure. So I have two parcels actually. They're roughly, it's oddly enough, they're each 140 acres, roughly give or take 5 acres. So I have kind of like a big wood setting up near some state land. We have like 4 or 5 thousand acres of state land, and I'm kind of sandwiched right in between for one of my parcels. And then another parcel is kind of right off of Lake Erie, near Route 20, Route 5 in that area. And I leased that section from a farmer. They really take care of the land. They do their thing, and they kind of rotate. So, it's usually corn and soybean back and forth. That's the property that's really paid off, and I think it's obviously because of the ag. The bigger bucks tend to gravitate toward that heavy ag section. As far as the other 140 that I have, I call it the big woods, but so I have like 3 parcels that I do usually for fall. I stopped putting in summer food plots. It's good, but what was happening is I was getting what they call like a doe factory. I was getting so many does on the property that it just got overrun, and there was too much competition, and the bucks just were not showing up. So over a few years, I kind of dialed it back over there. And I'm trying to get rid of some of the does because most of the bucks seem to show up during, the rut phase. They won't be there in October. You'll catch them for a 3-week window, and then they're back off to their own thing. But I do a lot of, like I said, brassicas, clovers, the standard stuff that everybody does, but I manage it a little different. I break up my food plots. So a lot of people will see on TV all these highly manicured fields and everything. That might be great if you're really not hunting it. If you go in there 1 or 2 times, okay. But a guy like me, if I'm having a vacation for a week or two and I want to hunt 5 days in one location, I can't do that unless them fields are broke up. And what I mean is I want them to look overrun. I want the food plots to look rough. I don't, them big bucks, they don't want to come through this highly manicured food plot. They want cover. That's what they seek. They stay on the fringes. You know, I try to tell people, look, keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to manicure everything to the nines. Just get it to where they have good food. Keep the cover there, because the minute I started losing the cover, that's what I realized, that some of the bucks were disappearing. I'm like, well, wait a minute, the food's here, but it was just too open. Even though it was, quarter mile back in the woods or half mile back in the woods, them big bucks, man, they're a different breed. So they stayed on the fringes until I started like implementing, I'd section them off. And what happens is when they come up the ravines or down the ravines, and they're looking for does, they have to get into there. They actually have to break out into the 1.5 acre food plot because he can't see all the way across it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that started, getting bucks to travel more, and then they were making more scrapes in the food plots because they had to spend more time zigzagging through it all to look for does.
Gotcha.
So what I was doing is keeping them on my property longer. So that's my focus, is keep them on my parcels longer. The longer I can do that, the less they're on a neighbor's property.
Gotcha.
And then I started learning more. And most of my learning, besides the Tactacams, it came from time on stand, man. The years I've just sat and watched and learned, 3-4 years, I might not have got a buck. 5 years, 6 years, but that 7th year, it'll pay off, because I learned what they were doing, how they did it, and then I implemented my strategies around what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about time on stand, or boots on the ground basically, and using that to help educate yourself, and obviously anybody who's familiar with trail cameras or what they have to offer to them, if you've been running them for years, you certainly have the realization that it offers you a picture of what's going on, but there can be so much happening around it, right? But when you talk about time and stand, I guess where I'm going with that is, there's that constant battle of, well, am I hunting smart? Am I getting in the stand when it's right? Is my tactic correct to try and kill this big deer? Because you don't want to overhunt an area and blow them out of there or hunt at the wrong time. So where's that balance? Where's that balance in having, in your opinion, in having boots on the ground enough to learn your property and not negatively impacting the deer you're trying to hunt?
Right. So that will differ kind of with every property, but I can give you a gist of what I do.
Yeah.
So the 150 that I took my big buck on this year, what I had done over the last 3 years is played Ring Around the Rosie, chasing these bucks like crazy. But I identified the places that they wanted to go and their trail crossings. So like I said, in this 140, there's 40 acres of corn, and then the other 100 is kind of spaced out all the way around it in timber. And then I would find where they were coming in and where they were coming out, and I would set trail cameras. And then I would learn, okay, they're coming here or they're coming over there, what times, how they're doing it, and then I would backtrack that. I would backtrack that maybe 100 yards into the timber, and then I would say, oh, well, they went left here, or they went to the right side, or and it got me to a point where, okay, I need to have cameras here, 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 here. And it led me, to where I'm at now. I run 22 cameras a season,
Wow.
So many on each property. What that did is give me the intel and insight, like, okay, this is where they travel. I know they travel here. Let's put the cameras here. So every year they may differ maybe 50 yards or 60 yards in a different direction, but the cameras generally stay in the same areas because the deer travel the same areas.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have them out, I let them run, and then I wait for those magical moments. So if I'm seeing some deer chasing, and then I see that first buck step into daylight, it might not even have to be daylight. I really like doing something else. So if I see them chasing really heavy, let's say, like this is what happened this year. It was October 30th, and on the camera, I was getting it. It was just going off and off and off and off. There were so many, I had to turn it like way down so I wouldn't continue getting pictures. Um, but there ended up being like 4 bucks and like 2 or 3 does, and they were just running around being chased so much by this camera where I caught one of the does squatting and urinating. And the bucks were coming to smell it, so I figured, okay, she's ready, she's in heat, they're after her. So what that did is that gave me insight and intel for the next day. And Halloween was the day I actually harvested the 11 point this year that I was after for 3 years, because he was one of those bucks that was chasing. So the night before, I'm seeing a lot in that area happen. A lot of guys they don't know when to move. They don't know when to go in. They don't know when to step in. Like, should I go? Should I go? Should I go? If you're seeing that the night before and you're getting that type of volume, 3 or 4 does and a few bucks chasing around, get into that stand the next day or the next 2 days straight. Mm-hmm. Because they're coming to that reason or to that area for a reason, or they're really comfortable chasing in there, and there's a hot doe and she's not going to go far from there. They may run her up and down that gully back and forth, for 2 or 3 days. Then it'll start to cool off, and then you're going to get all your stragglers that come through. So I think that's some of the problem people don't understand is when to actually go. They'd rather be at work and tell their buddy, oh, look at all these chasing pictures. I got these deer running around, when they should have actually taken the next 2 days off and been in the woods hunting them deer, But the balance, that's kind of the balance. So I get a lot of cameras out and I let them do their thing. But you have to know your woods. You have to know how they're moving. Once you have those cameras set, then you can rely on them. You can stay back. And then when they give you the intel you need, as long as they're functioning properly, it's go time when you see, what you need to see.
Yeah. I myself have struggled with that, I feel like, over the years, as far as okay, when do I go? When is the right time? Because it's really the last 4 years since we have had this place down here has really been when I've been trying to educate myself a whole lot more than I have been previously on the right, I would consider just the right way to hunt whitetail deer. And when you are as involved in the management strategy as we are, and this year I feel like I've had a better grasp on where my deer are, what their normal patterns are, and then recognizing, again, like you just mentioned, those characteristics. It's like yesterday at the time we're recording this, I Saturday and Sunday I was seeing what I wanted to see, and I had the day off on Monday, so it was like, all right, I gotta like get up at 3:45 and drive all the way out there and hunt and drive home at night so I can be back for work on Tuesday. But it's like I'm going. We're gonna get in the stand. We're gonna hunt. And I had eyes on my target buck. He was in there. He was in there multiple times that day. I put eyes on him. I just didn't have an archery shot on him. But that was the first time for me. I felt like, okay, all of this hard work that putting in, like you're talking about yourself, is finally kind of coming together and paying off. So I think there's value in that for sure. I wanted to ask you though, you've alluded to it a couple times, this buck that you killed this year. Tell us a little bit about it. Tell us kind of I know you had a history with this deer, and take us
Sure.
into that a little bit.
Uh, so this deer's been on the farm quite some time. My father, who passed away, actually, his last year, he had laid eyes on the buck, and he was all up in a tizzy because he was trying to hunt the buck too, you know. But he was in his 70s, and it was hard for him to get around, and ultimately he passed from cancer and stuff like that. He was my partner, best friend type of thing,
Yeah.
but. So this buck meant a lot to me. So over the last, 2.5 years myself, um, I tried so hard with this deer. I was using my cameras, and the thing about this deer, why I was so grateful to take it, is because this is a deer that I call a loner. He was a very old buck, and a lot of bucks are predictable. You can get them early season, and you can predict them coming in, coming out, eating bed, even during the rut. Hey, they use this certain corridor. And the thing is about this deer we labeled Floppy, he wouldn't do that. He was a nomad. He was everywhere and nowhere
Hmm.
all the time. He would show up on all your cameras and then be gone for 5 days and then show up for one. And then when you tried to pattern him and hunt this tree stand or hunt that tree stand, he was always at another tree stand location. It was rough. It was a rough 2.5 years. I attribute being able to harvest him to that doe that was in heat, because the other bucks were chasing her. He was on the first one. I believe she was one of the first ones on the farm that came ready, and that whole gaggle of deer was just together. But it's taken, like I said, almost 3 years to get this deer. And basically, what had happened, I'll break it down to you. I like I said, I seen the camera footage. I seen the deer chasing the night before, and I told myself, hey, I can't be there in the morning. And sure enough, they were there 8, 9 o'clock. They were there chasing each other, running around behind the grapes over there. And I was upset because I was like, oh my God, I'm not there. I'm not there. And they're right there. So I was like, I can get out there. It was like 1 o'clock, got my gear, packed it up, and I left. And I got in the stand. It was like 2 o'clock. And I was like, please just let them come back. Sat there. It was quite windy. It was actually 78 degrees. So that's why I don't attribute a lot of weather, warm weather. People say, well, they're not moving. In certain areas, they're moving. They're still chasing. It's just they're in their little environments. It might be a little 10-acre section, and they're there. But it was 20-mile-an-hour winds. It was 78 degrees on Halloween, and I was like, yeah, I'm sweating. I don't think they might not come by, but 4 o'clock, sure, the doe come running right over the ridge, and I mean, she was flying, she was booking. So I looked off to my right, and the rest of them just came. There was like two mediocre bucks, like a 6 and an 8, like that were decent, but then my shooter buck was behind them. And when she came over the hill, they were snorting, grunting, drooling. It was the whole 9 yards, kind of like you see on TV. So it's a different thing when you see it in real life, though. So about 85 yards to my right, they were hauling, and I figured she's going to run right by me, take them all out into the corn, and I'm not going to see them for the rest of the night. But what she had done is, probably about 80, 90 yards behind me, she must have hooked around and came up the side of the grapes. So I heard the hooves coming. So I grabbed the bow, I got ready, and sure enough, on my left side, she went up. The other two bucks came flying past, and I had drawn back. So I was waiting. I figured he's going to come, and then I can shoot. This is a 15-yard shot, but he didn't come. So I'm at full draw, and I had to like look out of the corner of my eye, and he was standing there,
Hmm.
maybe 25 yards behind my tree stand. So I'm frozen, and he kind of like looked up at me, and I think he knew I was there. But I think what saved me was all the wind, 20-mile-an-hour wind, everything's rocking and rolling, things are moving a little bit, and he wasn't too concerned. So then I watched his eye, and he focused back on what they were doing down in the bottom, where them deer chased her. Because let's face it, he was out of breath.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big deer. He was not keeping up with them two younger deer chasing her. He was, I mean, seriously out of breath, panting, mouth was open, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
So what he does is I see him start to go, and he's going to go on my right side. So I had to spin around, at full draw. He came at about 20 yards to my right. So I made the noise like everybody, meh, he stops, and then he looks right at me. And as he looks at me, I put the pin on him. Just as I hit the release, he takes a step. He's going to take a step to go. And as he did that, I shot back maybe good 5 inches probably. Instead of catching him straight through the lungs, I caught the full liver and the offside lung.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was a good shot. I knew it was still a kill shot, but I was worried because them big bucks, like I say, are built different.
Mm-hmm.
They're 100%, you can shoot a deer like that and they'll die quickly. But them big ones, man, they go. They just have a different drive. So I hit him. I seen him take off, tail down. He was low to the ground. He was moving. He got maybe about 90 yards over the knoll and then he disappeared. And I was stoked at the time. And then I was like, well, I gotta see, So I waited till about 5. I got down, I got my arrow. It was covered. So I was like, all right, that's a good sign. But then I went up to the knoll where he disappeared and I didn't have a good track. I didn't have a good, blood trail. And I was like, well, you know what? When in doubt, back out.
Yeah.
I knew it was warm, but the problem is the stuff he was going into in the bottom down there, it's so thick that you can't really walk through it. You kind of have to skirt the edges of it. And I have this ravine. It kind of wraps all the way from one highway. It's probably a mile long, half mile, and it just wraps all the way around up to another bedding section. So I let him sit overnight. I figured I would lose the meat. I was like, I'm gonna, because it's so warm, but I'd rather not lose the deer. I was trying to justify that in my head, because I didn't want to lose this deer. So we went in the next morning, we looked around, couldn't find anything in the one section, covered a large distance, and I was kind of distraught. I went home, then I came back at like little after noon, and we went into another section of that ravine, and that's where we ended up finding him. Actually, it was closer to my truck than where the tree stand is set up. He kind of wrapped all the way back around, so he was only like 100 yards from the vehicle, where I found him, where he expired. But he was heavy. He ended up weighing, I think it was 196 dressed, so close to 240. But you can't get him out of the woods. We couldn't drag him that 100 yards. I mean, we did about 40, 50, and then we were just like, grab the ATV and pull him out of here. It was too much. But yeah, it took me back. I'm gonna guess that deer's close to 8.
Wow.
He had a great face. I did send the jaw and everything away to a company to be aged. I think it's called deerage.com. I'm gonna see what that comes back as, but he did have a double white-breasted patch, and the thing about it is when he was caped out, they said that we can't use the cape, so I had to unfortunately get another cape because he was so bad from overnight, the bloating and everything. When they opened it up, there was like gangrene and some other stuff. I guess he might have been hit by a car at one time years ago.
Oh, wow.
But the cape was actually no good too. So I had to purchase another cape to get this deer mounted and everything. And some of the hair was falling out, and that's why they think he was sort of old, really old, because he said, in 12 hours, the hair shouldn't be falling out like that of the mount. They call it slippage, but to happen at that quick of a rate, he was like, that deer's probably really old, or he was sick or something like that. But we did call him floppy because on the right side, I thought it might have been from fighting, but the processor said it might have been, him being sick, where his one ear didn't work. 3 or 4 years ago, it stood up, but then it just, after time, it just stayed down. But
Wow.
it was an adventure trying to get this deer over the years. I was playing, hopscotch, one tree stand, next tree stand. I talked to one of our other pro staff, Mike Tepe there, and he's like, you got to do this. You try to do this, try to do that. I was trying to get different insight, but I just could not connect last year no matter what I tried. It wasn't my year. Where this year it worked out, like I said, but I attribute that to that first hot doe. And
Yeah.
I'll tell everybody that if you can get the first hot doe and you see that first chasing and you're on top of your trail cam photos like you should be, you'll know when to get in there. The minute you see that, you have to go because that biggest deer on your farm is going to be on her.
Yeah.
And, the little guys may be too, but he knows. That's why he's roaming around at night. You'll get all the nighttime pictures just before it kicks off, and he's going doe bed to doe bed to doe bed, and he knows who's ready. And then he's going to be near that closest one when she gets ready to kick off. And that's kind of how I decided to go in. But it was a process, man. It wasn't easy. Them big deer are never easy.
Yeah. That was gonna be something that I was gonna ask, and you've hit a little bit on it, was just hunting an unpredictable deer like that. You talked about Floppy and how, he would be here and then he'd be over here and 5 days here and then gone and then just a day and, back and forth and everything. And I've had deer like that. I have a deer like that right now. My number one, the biggest buck on our place is kind of like that. And just it keeps me up sometimes just thinking about where am I supposed to be? Like, this deer is predictable, nocturnally. I can tell you exactly where that deer is going to be every single night on the Reveal Cell Cams. But during the day, it's a crapshoot as far as what he's going to do. And so I was going to pick your brain on that, and just that deer or any scenario, just folks have a buck that's just driving them crazy like that and they can't get a beat on them and can't put a pattern on them. How do you hunt that, rut or not rut?
So I'm not going to be an expert, but I'm going to give you my opinion here. So what I learned from a lot of these big deer is they'll have a they'll have like, okay, so Floppy, what he did is he had one main bedding area in a creek bottom, but then the minute he seen my trail camera go up in that area, because I didn't have it there before, he vacated that and he went to his other two. Usually they have like 2 or 3 little beddings within that 150 acres or whatever you're hunting. So he was frequenting the other two. And since I knew what bedding he frequented and really liked, I knew he had 3 exits and they all came to the corn, right? So I said he's either going to come high and into the corn, he's going to exit down in the middle corner, or he's going to, where I ended up shooting him way at the end, at the tip of that ravine coming in. And I said, where should I hunt? I have stands at all 3, but I kind of went back and forth, but I was like, okay, I have to pay attention to his bedding. So every night, like you said, he was coming from that bedding. And I was like, okay, now I know he's using that bedding. I know where it's at. Now I have my 3 choices. So I have to hunt here, here, here. The only reason I hunted the last position was because of the chasing. So if I got the other 2 stands and I'm not seeing anything but him just kind of moseying out into the corn from, his bedding, he's going to keep doing that. He doesn't have a reason to change.
Right.
The reason was that doe. And once that doe went into heat and I seen them bucks chasing her, I knew he was going to show up there because he's going to come. Every big buck is going to be at that first doe. So that's why I chose to hunt that stand. Like you said, you seen years it worked for you. You weren't tight enough. You weren't able to get that shot, but it worked. But now you can use that intel and say, okay, they were 80 yards over there. I couldn't get a shot. So I'm going to move this stand for next year 50 yards over there. And I'm going to be closer because they're probably going to use this area or whatever you need to do. Sometimes that's what it takes. It's a multi-year approach where guys really can't grasp that. They can't understand that and I didn't either for years, but it's a cumulative thing. You just got to keep going. And sooner or later it'll pay off because the time on stand, that's where I reflect back to that. So you sat there and you learned, you seen where they were, but a lot of guys won't correlate that. They're like, oh, maybe he'll come over here. Instead of moving, they stay in the same position. So if that deer was comfortable over there, the chances are of them being close to over there where you couldn't get a shot, that's why they're comfortable over there. It's either hard to hunt it or it's hard to get in there or it's hard to be that close to them. Most of the big bucks that I've killed are in trees that they're very hard to hunt. You get in there and you're like, where can I put a stand? And where can I climb? And you're looking around and they're all terrible. And it's like, well, that's why they come through here, because they know you can't hunt here because it's too hard, So it's a whole bunch of things. But if I were you trying to get that deer, me just giving you insight from what I learned, I mean, I would focus on where he, like for late season, he's going to be bedding somewhere. And if you know where that is and you use a hang on, or you can get close to there or even pop up a blind without him knowing. Um, but like I said, mainly it's that doe. It's that first doe that really comes into heat on your farm. He's going to be there. He's going to know it. Like you've seen him chasing. You just weren't close enough. So maybe next year, it might be a next year thing. If you move that stand, because that's what I had to do multiple times. It might just be 50 yards so you can get that shot.
Yeah.
And then, I like, then I start to record the dates on, my cameras and using the wind from Tactacam and all the weather. People don't even know how to use their Tactacams really.
No.
They don't know there's a pin you can hit and change the weather and the moon phase and everything, and then it breaks down all your photos. Like this is where and when they were using. That's a whole nother thing that you could get into with the Tactacam, but that's really helped me. I feel it was luck this year, I say, but it's a lot of hard work that goes into it. Some guys, they can just go out on their back 40 and it's like clockwork and they just shoot a deer, and it's so simple to them. But other people, it's just not like that, and you have to do these things to get what you want.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel like it's a different game that I'm experiencing, at least in my years hunting the last 4, because this place that we're hunting, it's 800 acres. It's a big piece.
Yeah.
And like I have like the buck I saw yesterday afternoon, we call him the camp buck because the stand that I was hunting is literally 250 yards from camp. Like we kept seeing all these deer up by camp, so we put a stand in up there, and what do you know, there's a ton of deer up in these woods just east of camp. And all that is to say, that's like his area, and then my number 1 buck is completely the opposite side of the property, all the way down at the south end. Our place is like 2 big rectangles sandwiched together, and all the way down at the south. And I know where he beds. I can see even on the Tactacam his direction of travel. Like he's coming from one way, at one point in the evening, and he's going the other way at the other end of the evening, if you will. So he basically, I can see him get out of bed and he goes by the stand between 7:30 and 8, which is after dark, every evening, every night, and then again between, I don't know, around 4:30 in the morning, you catch him going the opposite direction, going back. And that's every single night, literally every single night that this deer is doing that. But then there's these days here, the last couple weeks, we're getting all this pre-rut into rut activity down here now. These last couple weeks, I know the corridor that he's running as far as the general direction through the property, because he's going anywhere from basically, we have multiple stands kind of to the north and the east of this spot where his bedding is and everything. And those cameras are catching him at just random times, sometimes nocturnal, sometimes daylight.
Okay, so he's checking right now. That's what Floppy did.
Yeah.
So when I said that, it was nighttime or daytime just before the rut kicked in. That's what he was doing. He was going to check the doe beds to see what doe is gonna come into heat first. So when I noticed the same thing you were, I was like, why is he up? It's like October 21st and he's daylighting. I'm like, what's happening? And then it would be nocturnal, and I was confused for a second. And then I was like, okay, so he's making rounds right now, checking for them first does. And it happened to be Halloween. So now what I would try to do, I'm just giving you my aspect
No,
here,
I want to know. Yeah.
is if I play the off wind. So everybody says, sit with the wind in your face. During the rut, it's a different thing. I give the deer the wind, but I sit off wind. It's not the best wind for me. It's more the best wind for them. You know what I'm saying? I don't want it in my face because a lot of times they still come from behind you. So I sit on a quartering type of wind on most of my stands. That's usually how I work it. But if I were you, if you can locate, do you know where your doe beds are?
We have general areas that we have intentionally left alone. We've done enough scouting, and I have a good enough grasp on where we have a ton of doe bedding in across this property with the size that it is, but I have a general grasp on where they are and everything. And yeah, there's multiple different locations. But
So
go ahead.
do you have a camera like you said you have a camera like he's in this corridor. So you have a camera in that corridor. Is it close to the doe beds in that corridor or
Yeah,
no?
it's kind of sandwiched in between a couple of them. Multiple of them are on that. A lot of our stand setups are revolve around some transition areas and moving from bedding to feed, and then down here in Texas too, we can run feeders. So we have feeders at some of our spots, which attract does and
So
rut time attract bucks too. It's how you do it in the
I
South,
get
but
it.
yeah.
I get it. My next question would be, uh, do you have like an area that's a little hilly that has like a little bottom, not a really deep bottom, but just a bottom they can kind of traverse over and back and
We have a few of those, and one really big area that fits the description that you're talking about, like multiple hills on both sides that kind of roll into little valleys that go into this main corridor. That's what he's running right there, and like
right.
on the far north side of that corridor, which is about roughly a mile from his bedding, as the way the crow flies. That's where my dad has a stand and a camera up there. And like this morning, I got a picture at 8 a.m. of him up there, working through my dad's area, and it pushes that whole corridor pushes south and then kind of curves around to where he beds and everything. My biggest thing just is we have everything out down here in Texas is low. We have all this scrub brush, all these mesquites and everything. So I love hunting from a tree. I'll pick a tree over a ground blind any day of the week, believe me. But my options for tree stands are so limited, and that's the other factor that I have to deal with down here. But
Yeah, that's hard. I would say obviously you caught him at 8 a.m. so he's ready. He's ready. He's waiting for that first doe. If you can anticipate where he's going to kick that doe, they like to kick the does into these little bottoms. They come over these little knolls, they kind of corner them down in a bottom and run them back and forth and around and all that. If you have a bottom like that, I would say focus on it, especially if he's running that corridor because he knows it. He's going to go up to that doe bed, and that's kind of what he did to this doe, I believe, that they kicked her out, chased her down the one side and back over the knoll because she's not going to want to go far from her bedding. She might go in a 200, 300-yard circle, and it's like this one big, circus. If it was me, like you said, but you don't have a lot of trees, but if you can get them near that bottom, eventually he's gonna kick her out and she's gonna end up coming through that bottom. Do you have a lot of does on camera near that bottom too? Or is it
we
just
got does everywhere. Yeah.
oh that might be some of the problem too. If you have too many does,
So as far as like the doe buck ratio, like I wouldn't call it out of balance per se, because we do have quite a few bucks. We have a lot of young bucks, a lot of young bucks. I, and we can talk about what your thoughts are on a buck doe ratio and what's ideal. I wouldn't say like we're not crawling with does like does around every corner or anything like
right.
that, but like every spot that we have scouted and that we've put cameras, stands, feeders, or a combination of all of them or whatnot, we get does consistently in these respective areas and stuff. So we're they're not. I would say it's healthy enough that they're chasing and they're having to move around to find a hot doe and everything, but at the same time they don't have to leave the property and get super far out to go find a doe to breed.
So if he's frequenting that travel corridor, he knows that there's a doe over there that's going to be coming in soon because that's why he's continually checking it because he knows she's there and he knows that she's going to come in the heat, especially if he's there at 8 a.m., just pre-rut right now. I would focus on that doe bedding near that bottom over there if you can kind of set it up. But you got to remember, once he chases her out of there, you got to try to envision where are they going to run and where should I set up and how is she going to get back to that bedding? It's like you got to take a step back. Like, okay,
Yeah.
she's going to probably run this way in circles or whatever. And it's a guess, but I'm going to say if he's frequenting that corridor right there going to a doe bed, it's because he knows there's a lot of young bucks that are going to be ready and he needs to be checking too.
Yeah.
So that's why he knows one of them over there. that's actually a good sign because that's exactly what happened to me this year.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's daylighting right now. I'm like, I need to, like, I should be hunting him right now. And I was just like, but he was still a little random. And then, like I said, all of a sudden, once that first doe came in, once you get that first picture, you got it. It's like you got to be there. Like if they're chasing heavy, if you see them running around, like really running around, and you're getting a ton of pictures, like go there. Don't that next morning, whatever, that whole day, go there. Like that's how I learned. So, I mean, if it was me, I'd focus on that bottom. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I didn't know you had a bottom, but I figured
Well,
he's gonna run that
I say bottom. This is Texas, man. It's about as it's about
10 feet.
as bottom as it can get. We have hills on both sides that slope down into this what I'm calling the corridor and everything, and it runs for, probably 3/4 of a mile or so, I'd say, through the property before it mellows out on either side. But yeah, multiple hills, multiple little valleys and draws, multiple bedding along those edges and everything that funnel down into this more open corridor as I describe it. So
Yeah, you sound like you got a good setup. It's just putting that pin where you need to be. Like you said, you're in pre-rut right now, kind of. So I wouldn't, I don't know if you've got any chasing on camera yet.
we definitely have chasing. Like I'm saying pre-rut to we're kind of right there going into rut based on, especially with what I saw with my own eyes yesterday afternoon and evening. This other north buck, the camp buck, he was nose to the ground running through the clearing that I was hunting over at 4:15 in the afternoon. And yeah, based on the doe activity and what the younger bucks were doing, I would say like they're hunting, they're looking. So
Have you seen them actually chase any does on camera? Like have a doe fly by and then the buck?
I've had a few of those at various places, and then last night at last light I had a buck chasing a doe. So
So I would tell you take the next 3 days off of work and be over there for the next 3 days.
oh man,
Because that's when you start to see that first one, them big ones are going to be on her. And if she's not going far and making them circles, I mean, you've got to put it in perspective. You've got a shooter buck at 8 a.m. and you got a shooter buck at 4:15. If you were there, you would have had him, right?
yeah.
So there's no hesitation right now. So it's like you got to call him. Hey, I won't be in till Monday. But those are the 3 days. That's when you got to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
That's if you can. If I understand people can and can't, but if
Yeah.
you can, that's when I tell them you got it. When you see that first, not the really first daylighting, but if they're daylighting a couple times and now you got a doe getting chased, you're on the cusp of, the next 7 days where it's really gonna bust out. But you want to be there when it's really gonna break out. You don't want to, like I said, I could have had them that morning, my own, but I couldn't get there till the evening. Which I was lucky that they came back by. But
Yeah, that's just been like trying to figure out, and it's still I need to try to figure out something, or at least try something, but figuring out how to try to set myself up in this area that he's going to be working and going to be running, because the a previous year's Sam hunting this situation would just be waiting for him to daylight at that bow blind where he's coming in and coming out, all nocturnal right now. But I'm looking at these other cameras, and I'm just thinking to myself, how do I need to hunt this deer? What do I need to do? And that's what
you're
what
gonna
I've been
want to
trying
hunt
learn.
don't hunt closer to his bed.
Right,
Hunt closer to their bed.
right.
So, because he's gonna kick them out, and they're gonna want to stay where it's thick. So, where that bottom does it pinch down anywhere? Is there any type of when he comes out of that corridor heading toward the doe beds? Usually they're downwind. So, if the does are up on top and he comes in, he's kind of going to come in and circle up around them to get their wind.
Mm-hmm.
And when he does that, he's going to kick them back down toward that gully toward your direction. So if there's a way where you could kind of pinch that down a little bit and say, hey, they might travel this way, or that's one thing I'm really good at and it helps me because I have a highway there.
Right.
So on the backside, I have a highway where they're bedded. So they either go east, west, or north. They don't go south. So I kind of focus on when when they're leaving and how they leave those beds, then I know once he runs them in, they're going to head this way. So then I kind of try to set up on that off wind to get my chance. But I know hunting 800 acres is kind of hard. That would be hard for me too. I mean, 150 is hard, so 800 is like, woo. But the only thing I could tell you to do is micromanage that down. It's 100-acre sections and say, what's going on in this 100 acres? Let's know it inside and out. Go to the next 100. What's going on here? That might be done in an off season. But even during the year, I don't know how many cameras you run over 800 acres, but if it were me, I'd want to know what's going on in every 100-acre section.
Yeah.
Even if it was I mean, you'd be running 25, 30 cameras, which is crazy, like
Yeah,
me.
we're not running. I will say this: we're not running as many cameras as you are, and we have much more land. So I know that I'm not getting as much intel as I would like on that and everything. I do see what you're saying as far as the breakdown too, and I can honestly even right now kind of break it down in that regard as far as my deer, because I know, like, I know where this buck on the north end, for example, I know where his range is, and then this other buck that I'm trying to figure out how am I going to hunt this deer, I kind of understand, am growing to understand where his range is, and there's very little overlap, it seems like. Not that there isn't at some times, but like on a property this size, we have, like, different bucks have different home ranges, and that's their spot. So I'm hunting the north end. I'm hunting completely different deer than I'm hunting on the south end of this property, 100%.
Sure. So. Yeah. And when you're saying that, like, it pays to know what bucks are in what areas, and a lot of times that overlap area that you're talking about, I see it because I can see the way they travel, and they'll use this one trail. This buck will swing around and come up this trail, and he'll swing from his area, and they'll use that same trail on an exit coming to the corn, but they're coming from different locations. If there's a doe bedding that is close to those two overlaps, them bucks will daylight more because he knows he's in competition with that buck that's close to him, and he knows that other buck is there. So wherever those two overlap, if there's where you kind of see them on camera together, if there's a doe bedding close to there, you have to hunt there because it's just a no-brainer. It's going to pay off. But like you said, you just got to figure it out and kind of get in there. And with the big woods, it's hard to get a pinch point. It really is. But the only time is when you see it with your own eyes. Like you said, cameras miss so much, but you were sitting there and was able to see, okay, they're over there. So how is he going to get from there to there, or whatever the situation is? And if you can set up in between that, you might have a chance.
Yeah. No, it's educational for sure being in the stand, because like even yesterday or this season, I'm learning things in this stand close to camp, for example, that I'm watching the way these deer travel and everything, and the stand's not in a bad spot, but I'm looking at these trails, I'm watching their frequent paths of travel. This is year 2 now at this stand, the spot, and I'm thinking, well, what if we moved it? What if we moved it farther, a little bit farther north, where this trail's kind of curving up and around, and those where they're hanging out at 70, 80 yards from me right now, it suddenly turns into 30 yards. So trying to balance those things and figure it out. It's a process. There's a saying, and down here in Texas we say it a lot just because we can run feeders and everything. It's like, well, if you set it up, they'll come in, and there's some truth to that, especially for does and young bucks. But I tell anybody that hunts down here, and I'm learning that myself these past couple of years, I feel like, is that we can't be afraid to move a setup. We don't have to completely find a whole nother place, but like, these things educate us, and if you need to move it over or switch the stand around to something else, like, we need to, at least I think we need to be prepared to do it.
Yeah, we kind of get accustomed to the same things. It's like, okay, the stands are here, we're doing the same thing. It's monotony, and you want different results. You got to move, or you have to know the whole 800. It's hard, if you can, like I said, if you could put two cameras all over, and then you kind of get to see the whole gist of the whole 800, and you're like, wow, because a lot of times I've learned they will go where you're not.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have cameras there, that's where they're at.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I definitely feel like we're not, I have moved cameras, I've shuffled cameras around and everything, and I still do not feel like I have a full grasp, or after 4 years, and I'm taking advantage of everything that these 800 have to offer. Like there are just there's chunks that I leave alone intentionally, and then I'm going to,
Mhm.
continually. But there's also other chunks that I'm looking at like, man, there's a way that I can hunt that. I haven't even had the time or the effort yet, I feel like, to explore it, and I know there's a way.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what happened with me. Like my 150, it don't seem like a lot, but it's totally opposite of 40 acres of corn. So it's
Oh
one
yeah.
side and then another. So then I had to go over there and learn that little microclimate, and then this one, and then I got to see what they were doing, and then the cameras told me they're going here, they're going here. It's a process. It really is. But to learn 800, I understand what you're going through, but I wish you luck to score on them, man, because I'd love to see that too. So.
Yeah, no, I'll send you a picture of them too after we get done here. That way you can see this deer. But yeah, I'm hopefully we can figure something out and try to catch him slipping. So I'll definitely.
During the rut, I would say don't be scared. Like if they're chased, they get a little dumb and they make mistakes. And even for this big deer this year, he made a mistake. So um, I think you'll get him. It might be next year, might be later this year, but maybe gun season.
Yeah, I only bow hunt, so that's my that's
Oh,
my curse, and that's so like our general season's open, rifle season's open, and as we speak right now, my dad is out there. My dad's self-employed, so he gets to he gets to make his own hunting schedule, but
hey,
and he did shoot a nice buck a week ago, so he's got his buck tag notch, but like the stand that he showed up at that I was talking about, that's my dad's spot, kind of, or one of his primary spots. It's set up for rifle because that's where my dad hunts. That's one of the spots that he picked and everything. Not that I couldn't go in there and try to find a way to bow hunt it. I certainly could, but that's the other thing that's just racking my brain. I'm like, man, I gotta. We have several stands. We've done it to a lot to where we have rifle and bow options in the same area. Over
mhm.
kind of in the same spots and everything. But this is not one of them. And of course, that's where he's showing up. I'm like, man, now I gotta find a way to find a way to go in
You
there.
Well, that's what I said. He's showing up where you're not.
Yep.
And that's what happened with me because I said on this one property I was running 15 and 10 on the other or whatever. And on 15 cameras, I'm like, where's he at? He's disappearing.
Yeah.
How is he disappearing? Where? And then I looked at the map and I was like, there's 3 sections that I don't have cameras. So I got cameras in those. I took 3 and I moved them. And then when I found where he was, that's what helped pay off. And they're smart. We don't give them enough credit
Oh yeah. No, they know what's going on for sure.
for
They're
sure.
smart. I want to talk a little bit about the camera gain and everything, because you talked about some of the data that these reveals specifically can offer and everything. And I know that really until this year, I was one of the people who was not really taking advantage or even really exploring a whole lot the statistics and everything that you can pull from these trail cameras. What how do you use those? What do you yourself do with all of this data that these cameras have to offer?
Right. So I mean, having 20 plus cameras, when you're running them, you've got pictures and pictures. You've got hundreds of pictures, thousands. And if I want to know, let's say I want to hunt tomorrow, right? And it's a full moon with a north wind. Um, so what I'll do is I'll go into the app, and when you open the app, there's a little looks like a golf tee in the bottom right corner. Open it up, you hit that. It opens up to a screen and it says like weather and other things. So I time of day. So I'll click weather, right? And I'll say, okay, it's a full moon and it's going to be a north wind. And then I'll click that, check that, and let's say morning, but there's different times. So let's say I'm hunting morning, but it's the rut. I might not put the morning time. I might just say whatever time because then a buck could have came through there morning or evening. But when you get into that, you'll understand it. So then I click those options, and then when I hit, apply, it gives me all the photos that were ever taken on a north wind with a full moon in day or night. Or if I want to change the time frame to just day or whatever times, you can do that too in that setting. And then it shows me all my cameras. Okay, so this buck was frequenting this area on a north wind with a full moon at this time. Are the odds of him coming back? Was it just a couple days ago? Was it, the last full moon? Is he going to do that again? So all that data gets narrowed down, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll try here. So when you start doing it, you're seeing more deer, and you're like, well, there's something to this.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like your own little record in that Tactacam that we use, of how to filter it down, and it works for me. I don't know if a lot of people use it, but some people don't even know about it.
Yeah. No, that was a thing, and I kept hearing about, like last year, for example, I kept hearing about, well, the statistics or the reports on the Tactacam and everything, but I never explored it really on mine. And so this year, that's when I started looking at it and playing around with it, and even still don't feel like I'm necessarily using it right necessarily, but it's so, there's so much data, and it's just
So
incredible.
what I also do is every time I get a shooter buck, you can label that.
Yeah.
So your buck comes up and it says add tag. Hit that and you add the tag and you can label your deer as a buck, right? And that saves. So then when you go into that little golf tee and you hit what, you can choose a buck. So you can choose, there's like 4 columns. It's like weather, what type of animal, time or day, and date or something like that on there. Um, if I had time, I could even open my phone and show you and walk you through it. But um, if you tag all your bucks, when you do that, you can hit the tag buck because that's all you want to see. You don't want to see the does, let's say.
Hmm.
And when you hit that filter apply, it'll show you all the bucks that went through on a north wind, on a full moon, on what camera. And then that gives you a sense of, okay, this can this potentially happen again? What are the odds of that? And then if you're like, oh, I just seen that buck there a day ago or 2 days ago, the chance of that reoccurring that you have are better. And then it's just applying the statistics, but it's a lot. It can get overwhelming if you don't have the time or if you're just the weekend warrior hunter or, but it helps. It really does.
Yeah. So I just looked at the time and I know we're getting close and everything, but I wanted to ask you this before we hit closing questions or anything like that. And I feel like we could sit on here all night long and talk about deer hunting. I'll have to have you on for another podcast here in the near
Sure,
future.
man.
But maybe after I kill my deer, then we can
Yeah,
we can follow it up.
definitely.
But as at the time this episode comes out, we're gonna have people that might still be hunting the rut. It's getting into late rut for them, and then they're looking ahead toward post rut, late season hunting and everything. What are some of the things that you observe in whitetail buck behavior during kind of that transition from rut into the postseason and everything? And what are some things that guys can keep in mind tactically and strategically when they're trying to still hunt target bucks that are left over after the rut?
Right. So I'll take my own property, for example, with all the corn. The corn's cut in a lot of places. Um, they're winding down. They're tired. They need to replenish. We all know it's about food. These bigger bucks are going to get into that thick stuff, them thick bottoms, thick, creek beds. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want to travel far. So you have to set up obviously between where they're coming out if you can, or on that food source that they're going to use. I have this one spot that I'm knock on wood where I can maybe kill a buck during the end of gun season this year or whatever it takes place. But I have a 10-acre cornfield to my left, and I have like a 2-acre green field on the other side of the fence before it hits a creek bottom, and they traverse that back and forth. But those thick bottoms, that briar, that tanglewood, that stuff that you can't get into, that's where they're going at the end of the season, and they're not going far from that food source. I'm saying 200 yards and maybe 300, and they're laid up, and that's their whole game for the end season going into, like, up here we have harsh winters, man.
Hmm.
It'll get real cold sometimes. We're kind of like Michigan, you know, a couple years ago we got 7 foot in one day. It
Golly.
was crazy. It was unreal. Everything was shut down. So, but the deer have to survive. So they're not going far from those ag fields, 200 yards there. And then that's when they're predictable the most because they're just coming out right at dark. They're coming to get their food. And I would tell you, as much as I want to go in closer to their beddings, don't do that. If you're 20 yards in, that's fine. Wait for them to come to that food source, because if you bump them out or back them up, you probably won't see them for the rest of the season, because they're very intolerable at that time. It's almost like they're ornery. They just want food. They want to be left alone. They're big old mature bucks. You know what I mean? So don't go traipsing way up into their bedding at the end of the year. If you know they're coming to a food source, maybe get 20 or 30 yards in the woods and just wait for them on the right day, the right wind, and but it's all about food at the end of the season, man.
Yeah.
Especially in New York, Northeast Michigan.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with that. I think that's applicable, especially you're talking about harsh winters and stuff, but you take it down here too. And even though we just get the occasional ice apocalypse, we
Yeah.
we still have food and everything that's going away in certain areas that are hot spots, if you will, for where these deer are getting food in the winter. So
Yeah, they will usually go back to their beddings that they used prior to the rut.
yeah,
They're going to go back home. They're going back to where they're comfortable, where they spent all their time prior, and you will catch them. Some might be a couple miles off. You might catch them traversing back into their home range. But once you see them bucks disperse and you're getting less bucks on camera in general, that kind of means that it's at the end. They're dispersing. They're going back to their home ranges, and then that's what, if you know where their home range is, like you said, his bedding. That's when you go back into there. You get a setup that you can hunt that when he's coming back in the mornings from feeding, and you can nab him as he gets back into his bed.
yeah,
Because sometimes they'll come back, they'll mosey back, 8, 9 o'clock, sometimes depending on the moon or whatever, the photo period time, the whole thing. It still kind of stays the same. There's the ebbs and flows, but yeah, that main bedding area, if it's thick enough and you can get in there,
yeah,
I wouldn't get too close, but as close as you can, like, because you don't want to bump him out of there. Like I said, at the end of the season, they're ornery, they're intolerable, they've been fighting, they've been running miles, and it's kind of like it'd be like if you went out and ran 30 miles and then you came home and wanted to take a shower and go lay down, but somebody was there, you'd be kind of peeved, you'd be
yeah,
pissed. So they're just like us, so
yeah. You mentioned the moon. I know I said we're wrapping up with the last question, but I got another one. So in your opinion, there's like an old, in my opinion, an old persona, or a long time one, I should say, that you have a full moon, the deer are up all night, you're not going to see anything during the day. Don't bother going out when there's a full moon or whatever. And what are your thoughts on that? How the moon impacts your daylight activity, and how does that dictate your hunting?
So I'll give you. There's two thoughts. Years back, I met Charlie Alsheimer. He was a great guy in the industry. He would hold these outdoor events, and I got to talk to him. And he talked about 3 types of rut and how the moons affected him. And I think he may have not been. He was onto something. It may have been the photo period. It may have been something. And then you have another person in the industry from years back, Chris Brackett, where he talks about the full moon and the vampire walk and the things of his own time on stand. Personally, I've seen daytime movement around a full moon. The 2 days before and the 2 days after, kind of like that 4-day span, it seems like them big bucks get up and they're walking midday, or they're scoping midday, like pre-rut, things like that, as it's coming into the full moon.
Uh-oh.
Fire, you know what I mean? And that's the time you want to kind of be in the woods. So like the 2 days prior, what is it? I think the full moon's the 15th, right? The 15th, I think they
I
were
think
saying.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you might start to get more daylight photos in the next 2 or 3 days right now, as we're going into that. And if I were you, I would be in one of those stands for those 3 days. The full moon and the 2 days prior, I guarantee you're going to have that big buck on one of your cameras, and you're going to say, I wasn't in the stand. I guarantee it. I want you to call me and let me know what day it was and what time because it's going to happen. And I think it just depends on the farms, on the locations, how much people have bothered their deer. There's so much that goes into it. Um, but around the full moon, I see midday movement, 10, 2, 4 o'clock. It's really awkward. I don't know why. I don't know why they do it, but and like I said, I go back to what Charles Alzheimer said, and even Chris Brackett talks about that. But that's their thing. I just go by what I see, and I mean, if I go use my app and I look up around a full moon the 2 days prior, and I use that intel, it's showing me what the deer were doing.
Yeah.
It may be October's moon, but it's going to say, hey, the last full moon, this is what they did. So are they going to replicate that during the rut? Probably, because they're going to be moving even more.
Yeah.
But I guarantee we're coming into a full moon. Send me a text. What's today's date? The 12th?
Today's the
So you
12th,
got
yeah.
Okay, so 13, 14, 15, the next 3 days. In these 3 days, you should be off of work in that tree stand. I'm telling you, because you're going to get a multitude of daytime photos, and then you're going to text me and say I wasn't there. But yeah, no, I'm telling you, it's something that I don't know. I don't know what the full moon, I mean, I don't know if it's photo period. I don't know if it's got to do with the lunar or whatever, but I notice it. And I'm sure a lot of other guys do too, because if they didn't, they wouldn't talk about it. It wouldn't at least be a discussion. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It would have never came as a topic.
Right.
Studies have showed that the moon doesn't have anything to do with it. Maybe it's the photo period, whatever it is. But around full moons, I see midday activity, which is, and you're going into the rut. It's a perfect time for you to bag that deer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hope that it can all come together and everything. I'm certainly going to give it my best effort as much as I can here. So,
For sure.
yeah, I appreciate the insight, man. Like thank you, appreciate it. And
Hey, I'm just giving what I've learned, man. If I can give it back to people, I'm not an expert, but I got a few on the wall, and I got lucky this year, so
yeah,
we'll see.
yeah. No, it speaks for itself for sure. Got a couple questions for you. I ask every first time guest on our show these that I'll hit you with real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. And like I said, we'll for sure do another episode because I wanna take the knowledge I just got from you and all the nuggets and apply them for the remainder of my season, and then we'll have to do a follow up and see
Sure.
see how it went. But anyway, for those questions, first one I just want to ask you about a hunting memory, one of your favorites that sticks out in your mind as one of your most favored moments in the woods.
So I was probably I think I was like 11, and I got my like first bow, and I was had my bear and everything, and this is before cell phones.
Yeah.
So my father actually went hunting that day, and he shoots this. Well, you can't see it; it's on my wall. He shoots this one 8 point, and it didn't die, right? So he had to get out to the vehicle, go to the next house down the road, call the house, and he calls me and he says, "Hey, call Uncle Jim and tell him to bring me your arrows up here." And I'm like, "What? What?" He's like, "I shot a deer. I need some extra arrows." So we went up there, took him my arrows, which they were way shorter, but ultimately, they worked. We got the deer. We got a good 8 point, but it's just still alive when we got there. But it was an experience when I was young,
Yeah.
so it was like, wow, I got to see this deer alive and everything he did. And um, you know, it sucked that it wasn't completely ethical because there was a time frame, but he couldn't do anything. He spined it, and it just it didn't expire in an amount of time. But that was one memory that I'll never forget. Watching that whole transaction being a kid.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a unique experience for sure, and I know I appreciate you sharing that because I know a lot of people. I like to say you haven't ever hunted if you haven't missed, if you haven't lost a deer, if you hadn't had something similar to that happen. Like anybody who has hunted for a notable amount of time has experienced something like that, and it's part of it. Not a lot of people talk about it, but yeah, we all go through it in one way or another. It seems like.
Hey man, I'm honest. I'm to the point, man.
Yeah,
I'm from New York, and I just, hey, that's just what it is.
absolutely, for sure. Uh, we've had a lot of whitetail talk today, a lot of focus on that, but for you, what's your bucket list look like? What are hunts that you would consider a once in a lifetime hunt that you hope to do one day?
I don't know if I really have a bucket list, to go after. I mean, I'd like to get like a Sitka.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be, they're kind of hard, but um, I really love my whitetail. Like I that's my thing. Some people love bear. Don't get me wrong. I did a bear hunt in Canada with my old man when I was younger, and he got a bear, and I'd like to get a bear. I've got some on my upper lease cameras, but I don't know if I could really put my finger on and say, hey, I want to, get an elk here, or go to Alaska, or do it. Just, I love outdoors, man.
Yeah.
I love being in the stand as much as I can, even though people say, well, don't hunt it as much. But when you're the only guy like on your set, you can hunt a couple different sets on that 150 or whatever. And
Hmm.
as long as you're doing the right thing, you're not bothering them. So I don't know. I don't really have that shining thing sitting there like, oh, I want to do that. But
Yeah. No, that's good stuff for sure. And yeah, sometimes just putting in the work and getting it done at home, having all the hard work pay off. Sometimes that's what's worth it. You get some years you get a buck that just,
oh man,
you're hyper focused on him, and that's all you want right there. I know the feeling. But
it was great this. I almost cried. I tell you that because I put so much into that deer. It was just like the relief to just to be able to put your hands on the deer and give him that tribute technically.
yeah,
Like he outsmarted you for so long, and you got to give him his gratitude.
yeah, absolutely. No, there's respect there as well for sure. Well, thank you again, man, for joining me for a podcast. I if we didn't have a timer or no sense of time, we could probably go all night talking about deer and whitetails and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, we'll get
Sure,
you back on for another episode in the near future. But appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
no worries. Thank you.
For our listeners, thanks for tuning in. I'll be back with you guys again next week for another podcast. Catch you then.